So, if you guys want to grab a seat, or
You turn yours on? Yeah.
so here we go with our 1125 panel. Investors pour into women VC funds, even as markets cool. The markets have cooled a touch, quite literally yesterday. I don't think a lot of startups are going to be making payroll, which should be interesting. You guys can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But on the stage, I have LaKisha Greenwade, Danielle Falls, and Jaclynn Brennan. And I'll have you guys introduce yourselves and go to it. All right?
Thank you so much. Really excited to be sitting down today with Danielle and LaKisha. And I would love if you wanted to just each give a little bit of background about yourselves. Let's start with Danielle.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Danielle Falls. I am a partner at First Gen Law. We are based in New York, Miami, DC, LA, Mexico City, and we are also running First Gen Advisors. So in addition to our law firm, we also run consulting and advisement for a lot of early stage startups.
And LaKisha?
Outstanding. I'm LaKisha Greenwade, CEO and founder of Wearable Tech Ventures. We're a global wearable tech ecosystem where we develop and promote wearable technology. We're supporting 100 startups led by underrepresented founders by 2030. And I'm also a partner with Gravy Wealth, where we have a high caliber syndicate of investors that work with us for our startups.
Two powerhouses. And this is what I love to do. So Jaclynn Brennan, I go by Jax, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fylí, which stands for Tribe. We do education, resources, and provide funding opportunities for early stage founders. So now we always talk about female founders and the lack of access to capital, the lack of representation, the lack of access. We know the statistics, 2% of venture funding going to women, less than 1% to women of color. But not often do we talk about the positive statistics, that companies with female founders exit 1 year faster on average, that when VCs invest in women, they're always getting a higher return, right? So now I want to talk about women-led VCs and what challenges do women-led VCs face in fundraising and finding viable investment opportunities. So what kind of trends are you seeing in the market right now, LaKisha?
Well, currently, specifically, there's a HBCU pipeline to develop VC candidates and also VC managers. Although I did not attend an HBCU, I think it's the perfect time to identify candidates now to make sure that we're filling those gaps and to make sure that we have people that understand founders that are presenting solutions to problems that we face every day. And that's important because you want to make sure that someone that is in that VC chair has an understanding and has some sort of empathy. And that's what's been lacking up until today, if people just don't understand. And so that's why you're seeing a huge takeoff, especially in the beauty tech market, especially with a lot of ethnic particular products. Now coming from the wearable side, I am one of the few global wearable tech experts, especially for the small business side. And my journey was really unique in that I didn't start off with tech. I didn't have a background in tech. I had an economics background, had a phenomenal corporate career, was a business professor, and still had challenges getting funding. But wearable founders reach out to me from all over the world because, number one, I understand the market. And so it's incredibly important now, especially being a woman of color and having gone through the journey, understanding what our startup founders are experiencing, where I can develop new pathways and attract corporate partners like we have with Boeing and Under Armour and Qualcomm to make sure that the pipeline of talent and the pipeline of products that they're adopting are representative of the people that they're going to be serving.
Wonderful. And Danielle, tell us what trends you're seeing right now.
Yeah, so, I think in addition to everything that we were just talking about, I do think that COVID, while it had a lot of negatives, had a lot of positives for women, especially women founders who are starting to fundraise, right? I think, getting everyone online and getting everyone to start to reach out to virtual founders and to, people that they wouldn't ordinarily meet in person, right? Who wouldn't run in their circles, who they wouldn't go out to drinks with, with the same old 10 people over and over and over again, really forced people to start looking outside the box. And I started to see a really great trend where unknown female founders, right, were starting to get outreach and positive outreach from VC groups. They were starting to get, outreach from individual angel investors and syndicates in ways that had never happened before. So I think, while COVID was challenging and continues to be challenging for a lot of us, I think that was a huge positive that came out of it.
Absolutely. Now, I want to call out the elephant in the room. We all know what happened yesterday with
Yes.
SVB. It actually personally affected me as well, and I'm sure a lot of people sitting here today and listening in. So, what do we think is going to happen over the next few weeks in terms of venture and then in terms of how this catastrophe is going to affect startup founders in the tech space?
Well, I could tell you who's at most risk, and that's especially Black VC ecosystems as well as Black founders, because when you look at the access to capital and then trying to prove success stories and then the capital is gone, there's a tremendous danger area there. However, one of the things that we've been preparing for at Wearable Tech Ventures, in addition to our other partners, is identifying alternative pathways to funding. And so we've been doing that with partners such as DoD and NIH, as well as some of our other investors in our investment syndicate, to prepare for this, because we knew with the recession that nobody wanted to talk about, we knew there was going to be a fallout. We just didn't know how bad it was going to be. And this is a time for us as a community to make sure that we're supporting one another and to go back to that 3Fs model. Family and friends really are going to have to stick in there and help these startups identify, do they want to sell, or what can they do to make sure that they can hold on until the market returns to a favorable position?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think, as tragic that this was for a lot of founders and a lot of funds and a lot of employees at SVB in general, I think we're going to see, a lot of sort of phoenix rising from the ashes coming out of this, right? And so, I'm excited to see all of the startups and the founders, particularly female founders, that make it out, right? And who have to get creative and who have to come up with solutions that maybe they weren't ready for. And I think it's a challenge, but I think part of being, a female founder or female, fund owner or fund manager is dealing with those challenges. And I think, unfortunately, this is going to be a really interesting test for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And on that note, question for you. How can investors and venture capitalists ensure that diversity and inclusion are prioritized in their investment strategies, and what steps can we take?
Well, they need to be transparent about who they're investing in, and then also who are the investors that they're allowing to come to the table. And that's been one of the tremendous challenges over the years. People say, oh yeah, VC angels, but who has access? And that's one of the reasons why we built Wearable Tech Ventures, is to demystify that process and to create a table where everyone is welcome. And so we invite everyone to, number one, understand what is this world of wearable technology? Why are most companies going to need a wearable in the future? Why is there this demand, right? But then also get integrated into the process of development with some of our public programming, such as our hackathons that are virtual and in person, but then build relationships with those founders overall. And ultimately, it's relationships and having understanding. And when you can help those two things, then you have people that may have invested in other things, not necessarily startups, that will feel more comfortable about coming into this space to help fuel the pipeline so that women, especially people of color, have the backing that they need, and so that they don't serve at a deficit.
I love that. Now, Wearable Tech Ventures, talk about the types of checks you're writing. Talk about the founders that you're looking for. What really moves the needle?
Well, we'll be disclosing some of that in July. So I've been telling everybody to hold on to July. Make sure you go to wearabletechventures.org. Okay. And register for our platforms. We've got some big announcements that are about to happen. But also with Gravy Wealth, where I'm a partner, and we established a partnership where they get first look status in addition to some of our corporate partners. We have agreements. As these companies are coming in, they set the established benchmark as to what it is that they're trying to raise. We have a certain investment thesis. So some of that is kept private. But we have been incredibly successful. And I can tell you that even on the syndicate side, we've had deals such as John Legend and Diddy. So we are ready for startups that are led by women and led by people of color, so that we can help them be successful.
Yes, we love to hear that. Now, Danielle, how do you balance advising startups and emerging companies on corporate transactions, compliance, and risk exposure?
It's a loaded question. So, I think going back to, what we were just saying about the types of investors, right? That you are looking to invest when you're really trying to increase outreach, for women, for, minority founders. I think that's something that we really look at, right? Both from a risk and compliance side, but also from an advisement perspective, right? And so, I'm sure no one here was watching, because you all have much more interesting things to do, right? But last week, in front of Congress, a bunch of VCs went up, right, and talked about actually lowering the accredited investor threshold, right, because I think that's a very, discriminatory and sort of self-fulfilling prophecy in that way, where you're excluding a lot of female investors, female angels, minority angels, and people who want to get involved in that space simply because the law doesn't let them, right? And that's something that we're constantly struggling with when we're trying to advise these companies, and they're like, what do you mean I can't take money from my aunt? What do you mean I can't take money from my grandma and my best friend because they don't meet these arbitrary standards that someone in Washington came up with 60 years ago, right? And I think, that's something that we struggle with daily, and something that we're hoping, and trying to get involved with in that change as well. So I think, sort of on the very top line regulatory front, that's something very real that, a lot of founders that are raising have a hard time coming to terms with, and rightfully so, right? I had a hard time coming to terms with that as a new lawyer who was reading these statutes, and the regulations coming out from the SEC and being like, wait, this doesn't make sense, right? I know a ton of people who can make smart investment decisions, and just because they don't make $250,000 a year, right, and whatever the thresholds are for accredited investors, they're not able to get into this, exclusive club, and that doesn't seem right.
Can you both talk a little bit about syndicates on that note? Like why syndicates are so important, why special purpose vehicles are important, especially when it comes to accreditation and creating that breaking that barrier and making sure people are able to invest?
I just have to start by saying that this panel is timely. And especially with, everything that's been happening in the news from Congress to what we saw yesterday in Silicon Valley. Last week, literally, I hosted a dinner in Baltimore, Maryland, and I co-partnered with that with Get Cities, which is funded by Pivotal Ventures, which is backed by Melinda Gates Foundation. And that dinner was focused on enhancing and increasing funding for female startups. And so we began the ideation of how can we improve this pipeline. We discussed what it means to be an angel, whether that's official angel or unofficial angel, and we developed solutions. So we didn't just sit at a table to continue to talk about the problem, but we're developing solutions that can be modeled around the country. And that started in Baltimore with me. Hey. But anyway, as far as the syndicate, it's incredibly important that you have groups of people that come from similar backgrounds. And of course, ours is a high caliber type of investor. So if you're interested, make sure you go to gravywealth.com, sign up for the newsletter. But there are many benefits. So it's almost like a mastermind. You also have community. You get access to deals, and you can even contribute deals that others may not know about. And that's important from that awareness perspective, because too often, historically, deals were kept secret, or you had to know someone to get access to the deal in order to be at the table and obtain generational wealth.
So now we're building our own tables.
We're building.
And shout out to Pivotal Ventures, their
Yeah.
Fylí sponsor for South by Southwest this year.
I love it.
Yes.
That's amazing. Pivotal's doing some great stuff. I think, in terms of SPVs in general, right, I think that's another confusing sort of term that gets a lot of founders tripped up, right? But at First Gen, we're really big on them because they allow you to have up to 35 unaccredited investors, right, which a lot of people don't realize. So it's a great funding vehicle, especially for a friends and family round, especially for a pre-seed or a non-price round. So we're constantly, helping our founders sort of maneuver that. I think one of the things that is really difficult in general with being a founder and putting together these fundraisers, right, is not only transparency, like you're talking about, which is a huge one, but also just sort of the legal intricacies, right, and the paperwork. The paperwork alone, founders come to us distressed because they're like, we want to take this $80,000, but we don't have money to pay a lawyer, right?
We don't have the money to structure the deal. So
and
also
we don't
talk
have the
about that,
time.
how you're helping startup founders and kind of giving them a leg up as they're just beginning their raises.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think one of the things that we're really striving for at First Gen is finding a way to work with founders, right, to help them get through their raise so that they actually have funds in their bank account to pay the lawyer, to pay, the accountant, to pay, all of these services that they need in order to be a functioning startup, right, that's eventually going to make them more attractive to the institutions when they come to a price round, right? Like, oftentimes, far too often, I would say, founders come to us when it's a little bit too late, right? And they have problems, and we'll obviously help them out of it, but we're trying to sort of shift that into coming to us and coming to a more affordable lawyer in a proactive way, right, before you get into some sort of trouble, or before you haven't done maybe all the paperwork you should have done or all the diligence you should have done, and finding a way to make it sort of more accessible for them so that you can come to us and we can help walk you through that process rather than you sort of wading through it yourself. Absolutely.
And I do want to share one resource. If you have your phone, if you have access to a podcast app, you want to download a Wearable Takeover podcast. We actually just produced an episode, and again, that covers our wearable tech ecosystem, but we featured one of our accountant partners that works with our VCs. And we identified things that startup founders need to do in order to get to that funding, to prepare themselves for funding. And there are tips on there that they often do not hear if they're in an incubator or accelerator. So we demystified that entire process.
All right, take out your phones, download that app. Now, my final question for both of you. What advice do you give to aspiring female entrepreneurs and investors who are looking to enter the VC industry? So we have a lot of people here today that are raising funds, that are interested in getting involved in the space. What advice do you have, or things you wish you would have known sooner?
Relationships matter. Everything is about relationships. Don't burn a bridge. That's number one. And then always respect your connect, because you're always going to have someone that's going to lend a bridge to something else. The last thing I would say is, or maybe third or fourth thing I would say, is to make sure you know your stuff, right? Never come to the table unprepared. If you don't know something, learn it. There's so many platforms that are out there now. And also one of the Techstars founders, he has a course that is funded by the Kauffman Foundation, where you can take the free VC course and get that certification. So, and put that on LinkedIn. So do things that show that you are worth your salt, that you're viable, and that you're continuously learning, and make sure, again, that you're valuing relationships.
Yeah, and I think off of that, right, and relationships are so important in this business, is find good partners, right? We all, in this room and everyone listening, we know that it takes a village, more than a village most times, right? And so find good lawyers, find good advisors, find good accountants, and make them your lifelong partners, right? Because those are the people that are going to help you in your toughest moments. Those are the people that are going to lift you up when you're getting discouraged or you've heard your 300th no, right, of the day. And so, I think that that's something that's invaluable, is having, the right people around you who can help you solve problems and who really, really understand you as a person and understand your product.
That's what we say, find your tribe. That's what we do. It takes a village, right? So anybody have questions for our panelists? I kind of want to open it back up. If you have a question, now is your time. No questions? Okay. We're shy today. But thank you.
It's early.
Yeah, it's early. Thank you both so much. You're absolutely incredible, and I'm wishing you an amazing chatting with us here at the Grit Daily House.
Thank you so much for having us, Grit Daily.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you.